Welcome. I'm sorry, the live just popped up. Good afternoon. I'm Christine Sadowski. I'm the Executive Director of the YWCA in Orange County, New York, as well as the Policy Chair of the YWCAs of New York State. YWCAs have a long history in working on empowerment issues for women, particularly economic empowerment. So today's Google Hangout topic of poverty solutions is one that's near and dear to YWCA's heart around the state and the country. We are thrilled to be the second Google Hangout of this, what we'll say is the political season that is being presented to you by New York State PowHer, which is an inclusive statewide network committed to securing economic equality for all New York women and their families. And as I said, we are the second Wednesday Google Chat. The plan is to have one every Wednesday leading up to Election Day. And today's title and topic of Google Hangout will be New York State Women in Poverty and Poverty Solutions and some of the issues, and just I think a nice well-rounded discussion about what women and their families are facing when it comes to economics in New York. So with me today, oh, well, actually, before I introduce my guests, let me also make sure that people who are watching know that you can tweet your questions as you're watching live to #PowHerList or click on the Google Hangout question function. After this event, we will post this webinar on NewYorkStatePowHer.org and YouTube so that people have an opportunity to share it or continue watching it after the fact. But we certainly hope that there are many of you out there that will join us in this discussion. We will try to be as interactive as we can possibly be in this electronic format. And to do that, now let me introduce my guests to you. Joining us today is Dr. C. Nicole Mason, who is the Executive Director of CR2PI and a visiting professor at Spelman College. And we'll get into what each of our guests will talk about in just a minute. And we also have Rahul Saxena, who's the Policy Director of the Restaurant Opportunity Center of New York. And what we're going to do today is kind of start with a general overview of what women are facing and what some of the economic statistics and reality are for women. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the organizations that work with a large number of women in the labor in certain kinds of occupations, as well as talk about some possible solutions to combating poverty and some of the things hopefully that we can all do and pay attention to as we move forward. We may have a third guest joining us. If that happens, I'll certainly introduce, oh, we have a third guest now. All right, well, let me go ahead and introduce, because it looks like we may be able to technologically. The third guest joining the discussion today is Barbara Young, who's a national organizer with the National Domestic Workers Alliance. And Barbara's going to be able to speak to us about some campaigns that the Domestic Workers Alliance has actually been engaged in to really look at economic stability and improvement for a large group of women employees, which would be obviously in the domestic worker category. So as we continue to try to get Barbara officially on, we are going to start with Nicole telling us a little bit about a report that she's done and some research that she's done around this issue. Thanks, Nicole.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm really glad to be here and be a part of this important conversation. I believe this conversation is timely given the newly released poverty figures by the census that shows that while the national poverty rate dropped slightly, it remains statistically unchanged for the most vulnerable groups. That's children, single mothers, and women remaining largely unmoved. What this tells me is that we need to think differently and outside of the box regarding the strategies and policies solutions at the local, state, and federal levels to move women and families out of poverty and toward full economic security. For many, escaping poverty is like winning the lottery. Very few win, and the odds are about the same. Only 4% of individuals born into poverty ever reach the top. When race and ethnicity are taken into consideration, blacks and Latinos are more likely to remain at the bottom of the economic totem pole if that is where they were born. Currently, 14.5% of Americans live in poverty, or 45.3 million people, down from 47 million in 2012. More than 1 in 7 women, nearly 18 million, and 1 out of 5 children live in poverty. And the U.S. is ranked 34 out of 35 developed countries for child poverty. In 2013, the poverty rate for single mothers was nearly 40%, with rates for African American and Latino women topping out at 25 and 23% respectively. And more than half of all children are part of these living in poverty are part of these families. In New York State, the poverty rate is slightly higher than the national average at 15.9%. In New York City, the rate is a whopping 21%. In New York City, it's not uncommon for rich and poor neighborhoods to be separated by a few blocks or a short subway ride. And so we really need, when we're talking about poverty, really need to talk about the growing wealth and income gap, not only in New York, but in the U.S. in general. In New York, the mean income of the lowest fifth was $8,900, while the highest fifth made $222,000. So, and the top percent made nearly $500,000, about 49 times more as much as those with the lowest income. Last year, we created an Economic Security and Well-Being Index for New York City for the New York Women's Foundation that not only looked at income and poverty rates, but we took into consideration health factors, violence, community infrastructure, and I said violence, unemployment rates, and a host of other indicators. And when we looked at the bottom 5 neighborhoods in New York City, the poverty rate among women topped 40%, and these were areas and communities of concentrated poverty. Conversely, when we looked at the top 5 neighborhoods, Tribeca, the Upper East Side, the poverty rate never exceeded 10%, and the unemployment rate was lower than 1%. And then when we took another step back, we found that communities with high rates of poverty and unemployment were also plagued with other issues and problems such as high dropout rates, new HIV diagnoses, obesity, and many other challenges and barriers to success and opportunity. They also lacked vital community institutions, infrastructures, and other types of investment. So what I want to leave you with is when we think about strategies and solutions, we should employ, and I'll end my comments here, in addition to policies that increase wages, ensure workplace flexibility, and paid sick leave, that we also pay close attention to what actual communities look like and what's missing in them, and work toward building more connected communities across the country. So I'll stop there.
Nicole, can you tell us, I'm just not sure everybody maybe heard in the beginning, what is CR2PI? Is that the organization that you did this work through?
Yes, the Center for Research and Policy in the Public Interest.
Okay, thanks. And if people wanted to find out more about not only the statistics that you presented, but some of the work that you did in the city to kind of combat this and make the connections between a lot of the other community need factors and poverty, can they go to your website, or where is more information?
So absolutely. Our website is cr2pi.org, and you can find the Economic Security and Well-Being Index. It's on the home page, and so you can just download it there.
Great. And I'm sure we'll also put a link on New York State Power's website, which is nyspower.org. So Nicole's given us a good kind of overview about how kind of insidious this issue is, particularly for women-headed households. Obviously we all know that the statistic is women make up half the population, but the workforce of women has grown exponentially in the last decade, as well as the number of families that are being led by their households being led by single moms. So obviously, to make the connection between women and poverty and how that's affecting families throughout the state is a really critical piece of this discussion. So up next is, as I said, Raul Saxena, who's the policy director, and Restaurant Opportunities Center of New York obviously works with an employment segment that is really, I would say, probably dominated by women. And so Raul's going to tell us a little bit about the work they do there.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Rahul Saxena from ROC New York. ROC New York is a nonprofit worker center based in New York City, and our mission is to organize restaurant workers to fight for improved wages and working conditions in the restaurant industry. You know, the restaurant industry, as I'm sure you're all aware, is one of the largest private industries in the country. There's over 10 million restaurant workers in this country, and that means that all of us have either worked in the restaurant industry or know somebody that has worked in the industry. But what a lot of us don't know is that a lot of restaurant workers, those that work for tips, actually earn a sub-minimum wage legally in most states, including here in New York, where the sub-minimum wage for tipped workers is $5 an hour. And you're absolutely right. The vast majority of tipped workers in New York and nationwide are women. In New York, it's over 70% of tipped workers are women. And that means that while in most industries, as you're all aware, there is a wage gap between the genders that exists for a number of reasons, including straight-up gender discrimination that exists in our society. But in the restaurant industry, that wage gap is codified in law. There's a sub-minimum wage for tipped workers who are overwhelmingly women. And we hear from our members all the time the issues that arise when your income is dependent on tips. You know, tips fluctuate based on the day of the week that you're working, the time of the day that you're working, the weather outside or the season. It makes it very hard to budget for yourself and your family. Being at the mercy of your customers for your income also exposes a lot of workers to unwanted sexual harassment in the workplace. We recently released a report on food insecurity among restaurant workers in New York City. You know, the folks that cook and serve and feed the city. We wanted to dig deeper into how secure they were in their private lives and how food secure they were. And we found that 41% of restaurant workers in New York City, 41% were food insecure in their private lives, and for tipped workers, they were 30% more food insecure, more likely to be food insecure than the non-tipped workers. So this living off tips system, the system that allows tipped workers to earn a sub-minimum wage, is flawed and it's outdated and it needs to be changed. And so at ROC New York, we have a campaign to eliminate the tip minimum wage altogether. A year ago, Governor Cuomo, raised the minimum wage to $9 an hour over 3 years, which we think is still not enough. But to add insult to injury, he left tipped workers out of that deal altogether. So while the minimum wage for everybody else will go up to $9 incrementally, tipped workers will remain at $5 an hour. And so we've launched a campaign to eliminate the tip minimum wage altogether. We have an opportunity now to do that through this weird thing called a wage board that's set up through the Department of Labor that will give the governor a recommendation early next year about whether to eliminate the tip minimum wage or raise it at least. And we're fighting to get that wage board to listen to the needs of tipped workers, the vast majority of whom are women, and recommend to the governor to eliminate it altogether. So we would love all your support in that fight. And you can go to our website, ROC-NY.org/tips, and we have a petition up there. You can sign it. I hope that you will. Thank you.
Thanks, Raul. Well, do you have any sense of, as Nicole was making the connections between, I mean, and you made the food connection, but, you know, there's obviously connections to housing, education for children, you know, all of the different family needs when you have your wages so kind of the lack of stability. Do you, as part of your campaign, do you have stories of some of your members who, what a difference it's made to their economic stability when they're able to either depend on a more regular versus tip wage, and then again, obviously the higher wage?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely hear stories all the time from our members about how economic insecurity, fluctuations in income based on tips, fluctuations in their income based on the day of the week and the week of the day, or how many shifts they got in 1 week, affects everything, every aspect of their lives. Their ability to afford childcare or health care, their ability to take public transportation, or to get to work even. And so, you know, as economic security increases, obviously the other aspects of people's lives become easier. We just passed a paid sick days law in New York City, and that hopefully will help restaurant workers and all workers, all low-wage workers, significantly, because we've heard over the years, over and over and over again, how when when our members are sick, they have to go to work, because if they don't go to work, they're going to get fired, and that's just a violation of our basic human rights. As human beings, we all get sick, and we shouldn't have to worry about not being able to earn a living or not being able to maintain our jobs.
Right.
So yeah, economic security affects every part of our lives.
And in addition to the legislative campaign, which obviously is critically important, but we know that sometimes these things work painfully slowly. Are you finding that there's any employers that are willingly looking at this issue and perhaps making changes? I mean.
Yeah, I mean, so there's two answers to that question. One is, yes, we at ROC-NY, we have one prong of our work is to coordinate a roundtable of what we call high road employers, and these are employers that voluntarily choose to take the high road to profitability, and that means that as part of their mission, part of their business model is not only to provide good food for the city, but also to treat their workers well with respect and dignity, to pay fair wages, to give benefits, and things like that. And so we have a list of those high road employers actually on our website.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and the second prong of that, and the answer to that question is that there are some employers that get there, but maybe not so willingly. So policy work does take a long time, but our mission is to organize restaurant workers. So when we organize restaurant workers in a workplace, we often can get we often receive benefits such as paid sick days or higher wages through organizing that we don't get through the policy. We haven't gotten yet through policy changes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thank you. Nicole, just to give you a heads up, I'm going to come back and ask you a question about some of the work and some solutions perhaps that you found through the efforts that you did as a result of your study. But I'm going to try to see if we can bring Barbara in. Barbara, I've got that there's a mute sign in front of you on my screen, so I'm assuming that means we can't hear you yet. All right. Well, again, we're trying to be joined by Barbara Young, who's a national organizer with the National Domestic Workers Alliance. The Alliance actually had a campaign, much like the Restaurant Opportunity Center had a campaign among their domestic worker membership to try to fight for, I think it was almost a Bill of Rights for domestic workers, and hopefully we'll get to hear a little bit about that. But I'm still not seeing that that's going to be possible. So, Nicole, hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but can you talk, is there one or two things that particularly you feel really rose to the top of your efforts that affected women's economic levels when you were doing some of the research and work in the city?
Well, there was a few things. So one of the things, and I think Raul touches on this when he talks about tip wages, but income. So when mothers are making minimum wage or less than minimum wage, that's money that's taken out of communities, and women and families are, forced to rely on, government support and help, and they are living literally paycheck to paycheck and really struggling to make ends meet. So if I were going to, in this election year, I'd really want to see organizers really continue to do the work around raising the minimum wage. So I think that's really important in terms of income. And the other thing, TANF is about to come up for reauthorization, and we're about to revisit that. And so I think it's a really important opportunity to really strengthen those education and training components of TANF so that women can really be set on a path toward full economic security.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
So one of the things that I think we're hearing in common is actually a tenet of the YWCA's, again, both here in Orange County where I am, but also throughout the state of New York. And that's really to help women raise their household income. One of the goals of the YWCA, particularly working with the target population of single moms, has been to really look at what are the whole myriad of ways that we can work both from a service perspective in terms of programming as well as a public policy perspective to raise household income. And I think Nicole and Raul talked about a couple of ways. I will give you an example of one of the things that we're doing here in Orange County, New York, which is we here at the YWCA have a program looking at non-traditional work for women. This is an area of work that was started probably 25 years ago when we really tried to move more women into unions and into kind of skilled trade and apprenticeship. And sadly, we've had minimal success at that. And so while it sounds like it's something that we've been working on for a long time, we haven't really figured out the strategies for how to really get good number, a significant number of women into these quote-unquote non-traditional jobs. And these are jobs that are usually dominated by a largely male workforce and are paying significantly more than what are some of the traditional female jobs. Some of those being retail, domestic work, child care, all of which are wonderful jobs, but for whatever reasons, and I think Raul talked a little bit about, kind of the lack of respect for those types of workers and employees that translates in many different ways, but most often in lower wages. So the YWCA of Orange County has started a course that really helps women learn more about non-traditional jobs, learn some of the basic skills that might be needed, and most importantly, I think, because I think this is where we've fallen down in the number of years that we've done this work, not at the YWCA, but across the board in workforce development programs, is we haven't looked at some of the cultural and societal issues that would keep women not only from seeking these jobs, but from necessarily being comfortable enough and successful enough that they are able to retain them. So our standard kind of platform about this work is that a young woman who decides not to go on to higher education most often goes into retail or child care or a nurse's aide, making probably minimum wage to $9 an hour, where a young man making the same choices most often goes into some kind of skilled labor, warehousing, driving a backhoe, making anywhere from $20 to $30 an hour. So you can see, again, as Nicole and Raul pointed out, that we've got real significant dollar difference just on the amount of money coming into your household based on the work that you're doing. It's going to have a direct impact on your ability to pay your bills and stay off services and even keep a level of chaos out of your life in terms of, again, building that economic stability, which leads to many of those other family success, community success issues. So we've been almost taken aback, which is a little surprising, right, because the goal is to try to get as many women as possible. We've actually been taken aback about how much reticence there is on the part of women to really pursue this type of work. So we're eager to continue getting out there and getting into larger numbers of women to really make sure that women understand not only should these be possibilities, but they don't necessarily require a lot of brawn. You don't have to be extremely muscular or fit even necessarily to do many of these what we term as physical jobs, but obviously with the increasing technology no longer require you to lift 100 pounds. So we've had limited success in getting women actually placed in some of these positions, but I feel like we're really increasing the level of dialogue about the importance of women looking at a whole host or range of employment opportunities. And I think those activities, coupled with what Nicole and Raul have talked a bit about in terms of how you raise the income on some of the more traditional female-dominated professions, really should have some very hard, tangible benefits in terms of increasing the amount of money that particularly single moms are able to use, in balancing their budgets in their households. Anything that either of you would like to add? I don't see any questions coming up, and I don't see that Barbara has been able to join us. But any last thoughts or comments from either of you about what's been said or other information you'd like to get out there?
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can. Hopefully everybody else can. I'm not quite sure, but
yeah, I mean, I think that I want to just, I guess, agree with everything that you said. But the you know, one of the things that comes up all the time in the work that I do here at ROC-NY is this question about, like, how do we value work, and what is work fundamentally, and what types of work do we attach worth to, and what kinds of work do we disrespect? And, you know, I think that all of us, regardless of what industry we work with or work in, we need to change our perspective and understand that work is work, regardless of what kind of work it is. And so there should be no kind of work where you're earning a sub-minimum wage, or no kind of work where, you know, you're not, you know, that where it's illegal, so you can't earn any wages legally. Work is work, and I think we need to start understanding that as a society, and I think our laws need to reflect that.
Agreed. Thank you. Nicole?
So the one thing I'd like to leave with, well, the two things I want to leave us with is that the fact that we know that low-wage jobs are not going anywhere. In fact, that's the biggest growth in the labor market, lower-wage jobs. And so what we need to do is to ensure that those jobs are quality jobs, they pay a living wage, they have benefits, flexibility, and that they have pathways for upward mobility. And so that's the first thing I'll say. And the second thing I will say is that I think we're really at a crisis point in terms of thinking about anti-poverty solutions. While we've made some progress in terms of alleviating poverty, we still have a long way to go. And so I think that organizations like mine and Domestic Workers United, as well as other organizations, we need to interject poverty in this election cycle, as well as in the national landscape, so that we can really have conversations about how to move the needle on this issue.
Thank you, Nicole. I appreciate that. Barbara, are you with us?
Yes, I am here.
Well, we literally have about a minute left, and I don't want to keep anybody who may be live, you know, from sticking to our time frame. But please introduce yourself and maybe tell us, you know, a minute of the campaign that Domestic Workers has been working so hard on.
Well, I'm Barbara Young. I started with the Domestic Workers United, and now I'm an organizer with the National Domestic Workers Alliance. And one of our first campaigns was finding labor rights, bringing dignity in New York. After 6 years, we won that in Albany for the National Domestic Workers Alliance, and with 13 organizations, and now we are at 43 organizations in 26 cities and 18 states. We have since won 3 more Bill of Rights. We won in Hawaii, we won in California, and we just won this past July in Massachusetts. And the Massachusetts bill is the most progressive of all the bills, because this bill in Massachusetts is even giving the women in Massachusetts maternity leave. So it was very important for us to empower the women, because, you know, when you empower women, you empower the city, you empower the state, you need to serve the families. And did you lose me?
You're going in and out, Barbara. We can really only hear, you know, maybe every second or third word. So, you know, thank you. I'm so sorry that we weren't able. Yeah, I'm sorry we weren't able to get the technology pulled together. But again, please make sure, I'm sure people can Google National Domestic Workers Alliance and get more information on your website. Again, I will repeat that I think one of the really critical pieces of work you all have done, among, I'm sure, much more, is these worker bills of right that ensure that, again, a largely female-dominated workforce have rights in the workplace leading to sick time and pregnancy accommodations and things that are going to really affect their ability to manage work and home and maintain their job and maintain their income. So again, I'd like to thank Nicole Mason from CR2PI. And again, please look up her information on her website about the research they've done and some of the solutions they've looked at in New York. And Raul Saxena from Restaurant Opportunity Center, or ROC New York, obviously doing a lot of great work to raise the wages of tip workers, which again is a largely female-dominant population, will directly result to more economic stability for women-headed households. And then again, sorries to Barbara Young that we weren't able to hear more about it, but the National Domestic Workers Alliance really working state by state across our nation to try to ensure better rights and better workplace and greater economic stability for domestic workers. Again, I'm Christine Sadowski from the YWCA. I thank you for joining us for the second Google Hangout. Please remember there will be one every Wednesday between now and Election Day, dealing with a variety of issues that relate to women's economic stability in New York State. Please make sure you're registered to vote. Please vote on November 4th. Please, as Nicole said, make sure that you know what your candidates think about women in poverty and some of the policy issues that we've discussed today. And please go to New York State PowHer's website, which is nyspower.org, to get more information about this hangout, about these individual agencies and the work they're doing, and about other work that will be going on through New York State PowHer. Thank you, and hopefully we'll see you again next Wednesday. Thank you to all the presenters.
Thank you.